The suggestion that Andy could return in Toy Story 5 may not have been universally popular, but it could open the possibility of one of the best Pixar fan theories becoming canon. Let me know in the comment section your thoughts if Andy were to return to the franchise. But before Lotso gives me a hug and then stabs me in the back...
Come and pull.
First thing you gotta know about me, I'm a hugger. Oh, look at you all.
I'd like to say hello, guys and gals. I'm Nick, and welcome to 30's Feedback. So, every Pixar movie inevitably becomes the subject of multiple theories, partly because the studio adds layers of meaning to their stories. Far from being purely for children, every new Pixar movie and TV show explores issues as deep as identity, morality, and human endeavour. It's never just been about talking fish and cars with faces. One of the most notorious and fitting Pixar fan theories suggests that Jessie, the yodeling cowgirl, once belonged to Andy's mum, who was the same girl who gave her away to Goodwill in Toy Story 2's flashback. That was seemingly corroborated, or so the theory goes, by Andy owning a near-perfect replica of Jessie's hat, which, it's claimed, was passed on to him by his mother. Sadly, Peter Docter debunked the Jessie theory, making its canon status impossible, but the upcoming Toy Story 5 could have a smart way of finally confirming it and ignoring the good Doctor. If Andy were to return in Toy Story 5, Pixar would be able to reintroduce the idea of fate to the franchise. Each toy is supposed to be made for one owner, as the first half of Woody's arc says very prominently. Jessie's story in Toy Story 2 reveals the heartbreaking truth of what happens when a toy is ripped away from the owner they imprint on. Jessie is broken by that rejection as much as she is by being left in storage for so long. She obviously moves on when Andy takes her in, and again when she's given to Bonnie. But to suggest Emily didn't matter more is to undermine the franchise's most beautiful sequence when she tells her heartbreaking backstory. If you pick that apart further, you get the question of why there's one owner for each toy. Why whatever magical force that creates them makes them attached to their owners so fiercely. Which is where fate comes in. Woody didn't find Andy until almost 40 years after Woody's roundup was cancelled, so there has to be an element of fate about their connection. If Woody is supposed to be part of Andy's story, then it follows that Jessie was always supposed to be part of her fated owner's story. And if Toy Story 5 retrospectively reveals that Emily is in fact Andy's mum, the interesting idea of fate and purpose would come full circle. By reuniting Andy with his toys, Toy Story 5 could confirm the double-edged theory of belonging that the Toy Story sequels otherwise undermined. Despite Toy Story 3 moving on with the introduction of Bonnie and Andy handing down his toys to his younger replacement, the original owner should return in Toy Story 5. Not as the toy's owner, but as the parent of the new owner. When Toy Story 3 introduced Bonnie, focus pulled tighter to the supposed meaning of the franchise, the inevitability of change, whether through death or maturity, and toys needing to move on from the past. All of that deconstructed the whole idea of belonging. Pixar was telling parents watching with their kids that all things change, and just as Andy grew out of his dependence on his toys, so too will their real-world children outgrow their parents' close support. Then Toy Story 4's ending changed the meaning again, suggesting that toys just needed freedom as a tonic for being rejected, which always felt like a band-aid over a pretty sizable wound, because it ignored the fact that the first two movies had always been about belonging. and for good reason. At their hearts, Toy Story and Toy Story 2 are wholesome, fun movies with deeper, darker messages about the inevitability of morality and change. Their uplifting final message was about not just coping with that inevitability, but enjoying life in the meantime. Woody comes to realise he will either be replaced or thrown away, but he chooses to live in the moment. It's a positive message that is mature enough to accept that it has a terrifying underbelly. But then Toy Story 3 and 4 changed the goalposts and wimped out on the original message, suggesting that it was okay if morality was inevitable and everything would change at some point. Everyone would get a nice handy reset anyway, so let's not be scared of death. The problem there is that the contrivance undermines all of the meaning of the first two movies, introducing two different safety nets that are far less brave than the meaning of Toy Story 2 in particular. Both Toy Story and Toy Story 2 introduce the idea of legacy, of toys being passed on and not just as a morbid fear that represented death for the toys. The main character, Woody, was a hand-me-down from the 1950s, and Mr. Potato Head seems to have been handed down from Andy to Molly at some point. In real life too, toys are passed down within families all the time. That's why the ideas of toys being given away is such an abomination, right up to the point that it's not. If Toy Story 5 were to reintroduce Andy and to have him become the new owner of his old toys in order to pass them on to his children, he would be following a real-world trend that would justify his return. Consider the IPs that Disney's entire business model are based on. Disney Animation, Pixar, Star Wars, Marvel, they are all intergenerational. Each passes down from parent to child, or that's the hope at least, and Andy wanting to reconnect with his old toys to share his nostalgic connection with his kids would bring the idea of fate and toy sharing among families together. If Jessie belonging to Andy's mum was then added to Pixar canon, it could also handily explain why Andy ended up with an identical hat to Jessie's in an otherwise unexplained coincidence. The real problem with Toy Story 4's ending is that it undoes everything about Toy Story's overriding message of belonging. Sure, there's a strong vein of importance of love and friendship conquering all adversity, but Toy Story introduced the idea of toys literally being branded by their owners. Woody may claim to be as happy as Bo Peep to find countless new adventures with new children while finding new homes for lost toys, but this new purpose cannot replace his true purpose. He is Andy's toy. That's the only way to explain the fact that he doesn't remember any other owners, despite existing for decades before Andy was born. Woody's Toy Story 4 ending is a lie, and not even a very convincing one. He embraces his freedom from the idea of ownership by dedicating his life to finding owners for other toys. He's feeding the system his supposed exit from his friends was supposed to free him from. If Andy was reintroduced in Toy Story 5, Woody would get the ending he really deserves, being passed on to Andy's children and staying within the family. And that would be the perfect open door to bring the theory of Jessie belonging to the same family into Pixar canon too.